What's up, everybody? Trey here, and today we got a little just kind of recap fun video that we might do a little monthly series here at the channel at. If there's interest, we're gonna recap what I listened to in June as well as what I watched in June. Became a bit of a film lover these past few months. If there's anything positive that COVID has done and forcing quarantines and more time in the house. I guess at least it's that amidst this terrible year thus far, man. But hey, at least we got movies and music to get us through. The music, though, is going to be at the front end. We are a music channel here, so if you want to just dip out after we wrap that up, that is totally cool. And then after that, we'll go through some of the films. But anyways, I'm going to be using two different sites that I really enjoy. The one for music. The first site we're going to be looking at is called Rate Your Music. That's where you can catalog and rate records on a half-star to five-star scale. You can write reviews if that's your fancy, and become friends with people, and follow new releases from some of your favorite artists and stuff like that. So I'd encourage y'all to check that out. You can also make lists and charts and whatnot for certain years, genres, all that fun stuff. And I'll put my profile link below if you'd like to be friends with me on there. And then for the movie side, much the similar type of site. It's called Letterboxd, and much the same thing. You can kind of put when you watched a movie, you can rate it, review it if you so please, and I will also put my profile link down below if you want to check that out, man. But we're going to switch on over now to the screen recorder and get my mug off of here. But I hope y'all enjoy this, and really hope you let me know if you've heard any of these records and seen any of these movies, man. Tell me what's your favorite from what I listened to and watched in June. Where do you agree with me? Where do you disagree with me? I'm sure there's going to be a lot of both on this. But anyways, y'all, hope you're doing well. And let's kick off with what I listened to in the month of June. And just a couple very quick notes before we jump in, on my rating system, anything I went 3.5 or above on is something I think that's worth listening to. 4 stars is something that I think would be the peak of most artists' career. Anything above that, you're getting into some, really, really high territory just on my system. Also, some of these we've already done full track-by-track reviews, and since there are a lot of records here, I'm not really gonna go in depth on these, but just kind of hit the highlights. And for the Talking Heads and Pink Floyd, there's a lot of that this month because I'm prepping for a couple discography ranking videos on those that I hope to get out in July. So again, not going to get in depth on those per se, but anyways, enough rambling. Let's get at it. Started the month off with Supertramp Crime of the Century. We got a review up of that. 3.5 out of 5 for me on this one. Thought it was a very good record, particularly like the closing track on it. Then I went on a little Talking Heads binge. As you can see, Remain in Light, their quoted masterpiece, and I think it's really deserving of the acclaim that it gets, man. Not only does it have Once in a Lifetime on it, which is arguably their best song, but it also has Born Under Punches, great opener, as well as the Overload, which is a fantastic closer. I really enjoy that. As Speaking in Tongues, man, it has the fantastic track This Must Be the Place, which is one of my favorite songs, not only by the Talking Heads, but favorite songs of the 80s. It also has Girlfriend is Better, and they really kept the momentum going from Remain in Light. Slowed a little bit on Little Creatures, but you got Road to Nowhere, which is, again, a fantastic closer. Really enjoyed how they continue to expand their sound as they progressed through the years, and a lot of different experimentation, and just, man, that Talking Heads rhythm. Then I listened to the Flaming Groovies' Teenage Head. This has a lot of Rolling Stones influence to it. As you see, it kind of came out in 1971. Mick Jagger himself had a lot of great things to say about this record, and this is one of the bigger surprises for me, just since I never even heard of the Flaming Groovies. Whiskey Woman, in particular, was one of my favorite tracks I heard all month. Go check that out, and if you like it, see what that record does for you. Then we did a full album reaction to Crowded House's Together Alone, nice 90s group from Down Under. Very succinct, good record. That'll be up on the channel soon, as will another full album reaction we did, Ben Folds 5, 1999, the unauthorized biography of Reinhold Messner. Ben Folds 5, very underrated group. I think this record is pretty darn powerful, though, lyrically, and also Ben Folds on the piano is great. Definitely suggest that one. Then we got another Talking Heads, True Stories. Here we really get some filler, but there's still enough good to outweigh the bad. Then we get Pink Floyd's second record. I listened to this as I prepared, as I mentioned, for Pink Floyd's discography ranking. We got A Saucer Full of Secrets. Not as good as Piper at the Gates of Dawn. Sid was barely on this album. Not everything worked on this record, but there was still enough cool psychedelic stuff in there for me to enjoy it. Oasis, What's the Story, Morning Glory, have a full album review up of that. I know Oasis is a very polarizing group, but I really enjoyed the record. Not only the hits, of course, Champagne, Supernova, Wonderwall, some of the most played tracks from this album, but some of the more under the radar songs impress me. Then you got the first of multiple soundtracks from Pink Floyd, soundtrack from the film More. Not much here. A lot of it does really lend to the cinematic experience, but hey, the Nile song, great and most metal I think that Pink Floyd got. Bob Dylan's Time Out of Mind was next up on my list for an album review we did for a patron. That is up already on the channel, if you can check that out. A little less Daniel Lanois production here would have been better for me, but great songs are sprinkled throughout here, enough to make it worth the listen for sure. More than can be said for Umaguma, the double album from Pink Floyd here. I will get into that more whenever I come out with the video, but that's only for completionists. But they bounced back with Adam Mother Heart and started to get on track a little bit, in my opinion. I really do enjoy the title track, which would set up some stuff that they did for metal. Radiohead Amnesiac, I have heard this record, but I gave it a re-listen to really fully kind of absorb it. A lot of great electronic type stuff in there to continue to expand on Kid A. Moonshaped Pool, I had already listened to many times. I just hadn't rated it on here for some reason. And then King of Limbs was my last record I had to kind of wrap up for Radiohead's discography. Definitely down in the lower tier of Radiohead songs, or albums rather. But hey man, you can't win them all. Then Lord's Pure Heroin from 2013 was up. This is a record I had heard half of, just for all the singles that were so huge at the time. Really enjoy Lord, man. Not as good as Melodrama, which came out recently. I would definitely encourage y'all to go and check out that. This record still had its merits, and it was a fun listen, as was Pink Floyd's Metal. This is where I think they really started to hit their stride here. Echoes takes up the entire B-side and is fantastic. Speaking of kind of some psychedelic and pushing of the boundaries music, Animal Collective's Merriweather Post Pavilion was up next. A nice late 2000s psychedelic work here. Very slick, very just intriguing kind of soundscapes here. I would suggest that if you're into psychedelic music. Pink Floyd's Obscured by Clouds, probably their most underrated record, Childhood End, is on here, which instantly became a top 5 Pink Floyd song for me. Very underrated. I think that maybe it's just hurt by the fact it's a soundtrack. One of the last Kanye West records I needed to listen to, The Life of Pablo, was next up for me. Definitely a little bloated at points, but hey man, Ultralight Beam, 30 Hours, St. Pablo, No More Parties in LA, Real Friends. A lot of tunes on here that are catchy and I enjoy, and if you're into Kanye or hip-hop, maybe check that one out. Hail to the Thief, again, was just another re-listen, and again, kind of suffers a little bit from The Life of Pablo's, where it's a little over-bloated at points, but definitely some fantastic tunes. My favorite off here is Mixomatosis. Then was going to clean up some of my John Lennon discography. My dad Brad and I are also preparing for a discography video on that. We have his experimental work here, which is just abysmal. We have Unfinished Music 1, Two Virgins, and yeah, the less said about these, the better. Sex Pistols, Never Mind the Bollocks. Here's the Sex Pistols, another record I went to kind of re-listen. It had been quite some time. Definitely overrated in the kind of I think the punk scene, but it's still got some of the most classic punk rock tunes on here, and it was the only official studio release that the Sex Pistols ever put out. Then we get to some stuff that was actually released in the month of June. Phoebe Bridgers came out with her anticipated record, Punisher. I really enjoyed Stranger in the Alps, her debut record. Great artist, one of my favorite modern day artists. Does a great job of lyrically painting a sad landscape. I enjoy Kyoto, ICU. I don't like it as much as Stranger in the Alps, but hey, it's still the first month of its release, and I Know the End is one of the best songs that she's done. Then also released on the same day, we have Neil Young's Homegrown, which was an archived record from the mid-'70s period that we're actually kind of reviewing on the channel right now. I thought this was a solid record. If you're not a huge Neil Young fan, I don't think it's essential by any means. There was that song Florida, though, that was a little interesting, where Neil Young plays a wine glass, kind of out there, experimental. Everything else, though, I thought was just solid, and I didn't think we were necessarily missing too much, that these songs weren't on the records, like, On the Beach or Tonight's the Night. And then we get Bob Dylan's Rough and Rowdy Ways, a record I was definitely anticipating. We've obviously reviewed a lot of Dylan on the channel here, man, and so it was kind of neat to actually be able to listen to one of his records in live time. I was a fan of I Contain Multitudes, which was a single. Murder Most Foul, the nearly 17-minute long, just very poetic, very descriptive, working in so many different just literary references, historical references, most notably JFK. There's a lot to unpack here. I also enjoyed Key West, Philosopher, Pirate. I think if you're a Dylan fan, this is one to go and seek out. For a guy that's almost 80 years old, I was definitely impressed with this. Don't start out with this if you've never heard a Dylan record, but if you are a fan and want to, see what Bob's still got to say, I think he does still got some stuff to say, and he will until the day he decides to hang them up. Then Unfinished Music number 2, Life with the Lions. Yeah, another half star from me. Not something that I will be revisiting in this life. Then you got Run the Jewels. I decided to run their discography. They're a hip hop duo made of Killer Mike and ELP. I love the fact that you kind of get the interplay by two MCs here. A lot of socially conscious bars, stuff that I really enjoyed. I honestly think all the records are worth listening to if you're a fan of modern day hip hop. Really enjoyed it. Run the Jewels 2 and 3, but Run the Jewels 4, which just came out not too long ago, I think especially had a lot to say for our climate here in the United States, in particular with racial relations and just navigating that. It's got some fantastic beats here. Killer Mike in particular has a lot to say about police, about racial injustice, and man, it's one of my favorite albums I've heard that's been released in 2020. Also here we have the Wedding album, which again is abysmal, only for the completionist. One of my favorite groups, Touche Amore. This is another album I just hadn't rated. I really enjoy them. And then we continue through Pink Floyd's. We got The Final Cut, the last record with Roger Waters, a bit of a concept-esque type album where Roger dives into the pain of losing his father in World War II. And then we have really kind of a Gilmore-like solo record with A Momentary Lapse of Reason. I know both of these albums in particular are very divisive among Pink Floyd fans. I didn't hate either one. I didn't love either one. I thought they were both a little bit bloated, had some ideas that didn't work, but still had a lot that did work for me. me and enjoyed it. Then in preparation for the Michael Jackson podcast we did, it wrapped up some of his discography, had Dangerous, which at the end of the day was a little long at 70 plus minutes, but I enjoyed what Mike thematically had to say. Kind of went to some more mature type of topics, and probably actually like this a little bit better than Bad, even though it doesn't have the high highs of it. I think it is a bit more consistent and aged a little better. Then you got Wu-Tang Clan's Enter the Wu-Tang 36 Chambers, often hailed as one of the best hip-hop records of all time, and for good reason. This is another one that I have heard, but it was years ago, and I didn't have the kind of musical base that I did now to go back and appreciate it. If you're not a hip-hop fan, this probably won't convince you. Very hardcore at points, but the down and gritty East Coast beat style and just the lyricism, so much talent in the Wu-Tang Clan, and you got some of the most famous songs in hip-hop history. You got Cream on here, of course, Wu-Tang Ain't Nothing to F With, Bring the Ruckus, among many others. Definitely a seminal record in hip-hop. Then you got MJ's History, Past, Present, Future. This was just a very average to probably even a little below average record for me. Way too bloated, and a lot of stuff that I just didn't think aged very well in just its sound, whereas Dangerous I thought still sounded a little bit fresh to me. History just did not. But hey, it is, I think, one of they did a remix to this when it sold 6 million copies, which is the biggest selling remix album of all time. And since this was a double album, it had his greatest hits at the start. It is also the greatest selling double album of all times, which just shows you how insanely popular Michael Jackson was. Then we got Pink Floyd's The Division Bell, definitely a step up from A Momentary Lapse of Reason, and the final cut, in my opinion, again, very Gilmour driven, and I'm a huge fan of Gilmour's guitar tones and what he brings to the table, so I definitely enjoyed this. Vampire Weekend's debut is another record that I just hadn't rated, but it's worth checking out for a little late 2000s kind of indie-ish type of record. Then we have Tom Waits' Closing Time, which album review is up there. One of the better debut records you're ever going to hear, I think. I went 4 out of 5 on that. I'm really looking forward to diving into Waits' discography more. Sloan, The Double Cross, is one of the last records I listened to in the month of June. That review is coming up on the channel very, very soon. A nice Canadian group. Huge callbacks and influences to the 60s and 70s. Some Simon and Garfunkel, Beatles, Beach Boys, Tom Petty vibes in this. That was an easy listen. And finally, the last record I listened to was Joni Mitchell's Blue, in preparation for an album review that is already up on Patreon and will be up next week on the channel at the time of this recording. And out of all the records, this one is going to be at the top for me, for how I really did save the best for last here for Ms. Joni Mitchell, and I'll just let the review whenever it releases speak to that, but definitely deserving of its acclaim. And now we're gonna jump on over, y'all, to Letterboxd. All right, so much like rate your music, anything I have at 3.5 or above I think is worth going out to seek out, and of course this is just my opinion. So started the month off, Boys in the Hood, a classic movie, I know, and hey man, it definitely lived up to the hype, and not often do I see a movie character with my name in there, but hey, we had a Cuba Gooding Jr. playing Trey in the movie. Ice Cube put in a great performance. Love the way that this one was put together. Nice guys. It's not even worth talking about. Kind of some cringy stuff in that. Then watched The Outsiders with the family. I read the book as a kid, didn't remember any of it, so it was cool to kind of watch the story unfold there. You had Francis Ford going in and putting that, so you knew that the cinematography was going to be great. Then I watched Side Effects, which came out in 2013. Kind of a nice little thriller. Had a bunch of twists and turns that I enjoyed. You got Jude Law, Catherine Zeta-Jones in there. I'd recommend that. And then we had 2019's kind of middle school Superbad type of movie, Good Boys. It was kind of average, but it was, I guess, good for kind of what it was trying to do. Then, because I like to watch movies that reflect real life, I had to watch Contagion, and man, this one hit way too close to home for what we're going through right now. Essentially, a illness, a pandemic goes out into the world. Sound familiar, eh? And yeah, this one was pretty darn good. Then we had Steve Carell's Dan in Real Life, another just kind of average film. Then we had The Earrings of Madame Day, a beautifully shot film, one of the best cinematography experiences that you're going to have. Great story there, even though it is in black and white and a foreign film. Don't let that scare you off, man. And then Wizard of Oz, never had seen it, and boy, it did live up to the hype, man. When it went from sepia to the Technicolor, ooh, what a wonderful, wonderful shot. And just, it's crazy that you know so much about The Wizard of Oz when you had never seen it. So many pop culture references that have just been permeated into American culture. And a lot of publications think it is actually the most watched movie of all time, just due to the fact that it's been in syndication and it's a movie, you know, kids still grow up on. Then we had Johnny Depp's Dead Man. Neil Young's on the soundtrack to this one. This one was all in black and white, kind of a Western psychedelic type of experience. If I was on acid, I probably would have liked it more. Then we had Almost Famous, Cameron Crowe's great movie. As a music lover, this definitely had the best soundtrack of any movie I watched in June. Lots of great Led Zeppelin tunes in there. And, you know, just since it was based kind of as a guy following around a group, a band in the 70s, I really enjoyed that one, as did I enjoy David Fincher's The Social Network. Jesse Eisenberg playing Mark Zuckerberg here on the rise of Facebook. I didn't really know the story of Facebook, even though I probably spend way too much time on it. It was cool to see that, and I love Fincher's work. Spectacular Now, great coming-of-age story that hits a little harder than a lot of movies in its genre. Then we had the Coen brothers Raising Arizona with Nick Cage. Great little wacky kind of a dark type of comedy here. Then we had Roadhouse, which I think was the movie I rated lowest, that I gave a little like to. You know, you go in and you have Patrick Swayze just cleaning the house, man. Sometimes you just want to watch some wackiness, and I enjoyed that. BlacKkKlansman, Spike Lee's 2018 movie, was up next. One of my favorites of this month. Kind of hit home with you know, what really was going on, especially in this part of June with the protest. That's my favorite Spike Lee film I've seen so far. Then I watched Mr. Holland's Opus with the family. I love the little callbacks to John Lennon and John Coltrane in there. Got a little bloated in the second half, but still good movie. Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. Just a funny movie where you just kind of turn off your brain to. Lean on Me, Morgan Freeman is a principal at a rough school. Also watch that with the family. Good little film there. Lady Bird from A24 Production Studios was up next. Really enjoy them. Very kind of artistically driven films, but also have some good plot substances here. A little bit of coming of age if you're into that sort of thing. Then we had Christian Bale and Mark Wahlberg in The Fighter from 2010. Christian Bale outshone Wahlberg at such a level that it took away almost from the enjoyment of the film, because Mark was just so outclassed there. No offense to the Mark Wahlberg lovers, but hey. Armageddon I had seen before, but rewatched that kind of as a family. Again, it's a Michael Bay movie. This is probably the best Michael Bay is ever going to get from me. Just it's so over the top, but hey, man, whenever Aerosmith comes on, every time I close my eyes, you know, you gotta get a little bit hyped. And then we had Doubt with Philip Seymour Hoffman, one of my favorite actors. Amy Adams puts in a fantastic performance about the kind of rough side of the Catholicism and the priesthood in there. Very powerful film, as is Glenn Ross, man. This is a great example of a movie that's just driven by its script and how great the dialogue is, and some great performances in here. by everybody involved. You have Kevin Spacey, you have Pacino's in this, so a lot of great stuff. Definitely would suggest this. Then I watch A Perfect World with the family as well. You got Kevin Costner in a very unique premise where he escapes jail, takes a kid hostage in a sense, but they form a great bond, almost a father-son type deal, and had a nice twist at the end. Then we have Half Nelson, inner city teacher, is addicted to crack, and one of his students kind of helps him out along the way. Really enjoyed that one, as I did Dallas Buyers Club with Matthew McConaughey. Being from the Dallas area, I kind of enjoyed some of the scenery and set there. Matthew McConaughey comes down with AIDS and kind of circumvents the pharmaceutical system. Really a good film. And then Mean Girls, you see here in the films, we got a little bit of everything. One of the most quoted movies from the 2000s there. I thought it was good for what it was. I saw after that Judd Apatow's new film, The King of Staten Island, with Pete Davidson, plays a 24-year-old who still lives at home, kind of struggling with the death of his father. So a bit autobiographical for Pete here. I thought it was enjoyable. Then we had Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington's Philadelphia, about a man who gets AIDS and believes he is wrongfully fired, and Denzel has to be his lawyer, and Denzel is struggling with his own prejudices as well. Heavy watch, great watch. Then we have Steven Spielberg's Minority Report with Tom Cruise. This did not age well for me in the special effects. The story was a bit convoluted. I did like a couple of the twists and turns in here, but this one was definitely my most disappointed watch of the month. Then we have A Serious Man by the Coen brothers coming in with another fantastic comedy and story here about a man that's struggling with his faith, his relationships, his life in general. Enjoyed that one. Then we got Scorsese's Cape Fear, another film that is very good in getting you on the edge of your seat. Great acting performances here, lovely script, always down for some Scorsese. Then we have the mob film Donnie Brasco, where we have an undercover agent in the mob and how that affects his life. Last two films, watch the 30 for 30 documentary on Lance Armstrong. Much better than I expected. Lance, very polarizing figure. I'm not necessarily a fan of his, to say the least, but a lot of stuff in here to kind of show you how the cheating went down in the cycling around Lance's time, and he's a very interesting character study for all the bad stuff he did, yet also all the good stuff he did with the cancer research. A very intriguing film that I enjoyed, and I finished off my month with Braveheart, which was leaving streaming services, a 3-hour epic about William Wallace. Definitely felt a little slow the first 75 minutes, but once we got into those action scenes, man, really dug this. Mel Gibson puts on a pretty good performance. All right, y'all, that is gonna wrap it up. If you're still stuck around, I appreciate y'all. You know I always do. And let me know some of your favorite albums and films that were mentioned in this video, man. Love to discuss it with y'all. And until next time, happy listening. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you.